The Russian 1st Guards Tank Army was an elite strike force prepared to break through enemy front lines in the event of a Soviet-NATO war. Kharkiv in Ukraine was a city prepared to withstand nuclear attack and continue supplying military goods to the front in the event of a Soviet-NATO war. Nearly 30 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the once glorious army and the city would face each other in battle. February 24, 2022, Russian forces that had assembled about 30 kilometers from the border near Kharkiv began heavy bombardment of Ukrainian positions. Russian forces, centered on the 1st Guards Tank Army, advanced from 3 directions to seize Kharkiv. This region had many Russian-speaking residents, and the Russian side optimistically believed it could occupy the area as they genuinely believed that residents of Kharkiv, supposedly oppressed by political influence from Western Ukraine, would welcome the Russian army as liberators. As a result, the operation plan was extremely careless. Soldiers were told it was merely an exercise and were not even informed of their destination. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces defending the city maintained high morale and launched bold mobile counterattacks the very same day. In particular, the 4th Guards Tank Division of the 1st Guards Tank Army, which advanced toward Oktyevka, west of Kharkiv, suffered heavy losses. Units advancing directly toward Kharkiv were also quickly halted on the 25th, believing they would be welcomed by cheering citizens once inside the city. Russian forces attempted to bypass resistance. However, wherever they went, Ukrainian forces resisted fiercely. The mayor himself led units to intercept Russian forces on the outskirts.
Russians, welcome to hell! You are not going to Ukraine! Go back to your own land! Across all Ukraine, we will prevail!
On the 26th, realizing they were not being welcomed, Russian forces began a full-scale assault on Kharkiv. The battleground of brutal fighting in World War II was revived in the 21st century, nearly 80 years later. Possessing the largest mobile firepower on the continent, the 1st Guards Tank Army began intense bombardment of Kharkiv. Greatly outnumbered and outgunned, Ukrainian forces endured desperately in pre-prepared concealed positions. Whenever Russian troops attempted to enter the city, Ukrainian forces would appear with mobility and intercept them, blocking their advance. Unlike other regions caught by surprise, Ukrainian forces around Kharkiv had anticipated Russian attacks and had prepared defensive positions and interception plans in advance. In the narrow area between the Russian border and northern Kharkiv, fierce battles raged between the two armies.
Currently, the most intense fighting is taking place in Kharkov. Kharkov is the Stalingrad of the 21st century.
If Izium is the capital, then Kharkov is the heart. We will defend it!
When entry into the city was blocked, Russian forces began attacking Kharkiv's infrastructure and factories. Cluster munitions fell like rain, yet even under heavy shelling and air, Kharkiv's factories did not stop. Kharkiv's defense industries had implemented measures such as underground facilities and decentralization to maintain production capacity even under enemy attack. Companies had inherited know-how from the Second World War and the Cold War. Subways and shelters of sufficient scale had been prepared to evacuate factory workers, related personnel, and their families. Above all, the citizens actively supported the Ukrainian forces fighting the Russian army. The city, prepared by the Soviet Union to support the military, demonstrated its full potential, while Ukrainian forces restored combat power through logistics and launched repeated counterattacks. Russian forces fell into supply shortages, in particular, the heavy equipment of the 1st Guards Tank Army, designed with an emphasis on high performance and symbolism, suffered visibly when fuel and spare parts were lacking. By late March, even Russian forces had to acknowledge that directly capturing Kharkov would be difficult. At the same time, the attempt to capture Izium was abandoned, forcing the Russian government to revise its strategy. The Russian government ordered the 1st Guards Tank Army to seize Izium, located southeast of Kharkiv. Izium is a key transportation hub that also saw fierce fighting during World War II. Whoever controls it can dominate logistics and lines of advance across eastern Ukraine. Until mid-March, fierce fighting for the city continued between Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army and Ukrainian forces. Izium is divided north and south by the Donets River, with both armies facing each other across the water. Politically pressured, the 1st Guards Tank Army was deployed to the southern bank held by Ukrainian forces. On March 19th, engineers of the 1st Guards Tank Army constructed a bridge across the Donets River despite heavy casualties. Russian forces concentrated firepower and devastated the city, occupying Izium by the end of March, seeking further offensive operations. Russian forces concentrated additional strength in Izium. In April, attempts to advance westward and southward from east made only limited progress and eventually stalled. Chief of the General Staff, Gerasimov, visited the front lines, but the situation did not change. While Russian forces suffered equipment losses not only from combat, but also from breakdowns and accidents, Ukrainian forces increased their strength through captured equipment and modifications. In early May, reinforced by units from the Izium direction, Ukrainian forces pushed enemy troops around Kharkiv back toward the border. Thus, the Russian government abandoned offensives toward Kharkiv and Poltava, prioritizing the occupation of the Donbas region. Both the 1st Guards Tank Army and Kharkiv had been given their purpose by the Soviet Union, yet their fates clearly diverged. However, what was most shattered in this battle was the shared belief that they were Soviet brethren. What Russia lost was far greater than the honor of the 1st Guards Tank Army or its weapons. In mid-May, senior officers of the 1st Guards Tank Army were dismissed